So the Germans, we had two army groups, one under Gough and one under Byng, the third and the fifth army, and they tried to break them apart, and came very, very close to it. And in fact, there's the high command sort of almost panicked a bit, and having loads and loads of meetings behind the line, and the British contingent begging the French for more reserve divisions, and we had something like 88,000 guys on leave at that moment in Britain. They were all called back. So it looked like we were going to be rolled into the sea.
Yeah.
So it really came very, very close, really quite close. But we decided, and in fact, Pétain and because it's in France, the French general was given the overall command. Apparently, they'd made the decision that if it came to it, if our lines were broken apart, they would concentrate on defending Paris rather than backing us up. You sort of can't blame them.
No, but it's also what I expect from the French.
Right. And the British were like, well, if we get broken apart, well, yeah, we're going to retreat to a pocket around Calais or something.
Yeah.
Or Dunkirk or something. And it just came very, very close to that happening. The fog gets mentioned loads in these battles. It's always really foggy, which always it hampers both sides, but actually helps the attacker a lot more.
Well, yeah, because you're looking at the guy who's coming and you don't know how close he is until suddenly you can see him in the fog. You know, this perfect cover for the attacker, really. You couldn't ask for more. You'd be begging, oh, good, it's a really foggy day. Right, we're going, lads, we're going.
Yeah.
That's exactly good for the attacker.
And another thing that attackers did now, is that you didn't try to take out and clear every single trench and every single pillbox. If you could bypass it, you did. Because we've got
more guys
20
coming.
Divisions behind me that they can do that. If you're at the front pushing forward and you can, if it's possible to bypass a trench system or a machine gun nest or something, you do.
Yeah.
And so that happened loads, which led to lots and lots of prisoners. Because if, say, you're in a machine gun nest or a pillbox and you realise you've been overtaken by 3 German divisions...
I may as well just surrender. What am I going to do? Fight my way out?
Right. So there's quite a lot of prisoners get taken in 1918. Loads, really. Okay, it seems at first, from the German perspective, that it's all going like clockwork. It's all going brilliantly. It's working. In the first few days of Operation Michael, Ludendorff's sort of over the moon. All the German high command are. They're like, we're doing it.
Again, it speaks to the scale of it in the first few days of the operation. Like, this is going on and on. It's just insane.
Like some of the the Ypres offensive in 1917 went on for like a couple of months. Mad, isn't it? Because in the medieval, the ancient world, it's very, very rare to go on for more than one afternoon.
Yeah, if
the battle lasts 2 days. That
was a huge deal.
Even in Napoleonic times, if battle went on for 2 or very, very rarely 3 days, it's almost unheard of, really.
Yeah.
The issue is settled in one afternoon of play.
Yeah. Quite
a lot, nearly always. Because these go on, like I say, for months.
That's insane.
Unbelievable. Well, we'll have to crack on, unfortunately, just to say some of the numbers. So on the first day of Operation Michael, the Allies lose something like 40,000 men.
On the first day?
First day. So that's, but that's casualties. So they're not all, that includes wounded, dead, and captured. But still, something like 10,000 dead. That was 40,000 casualties on each side.
Yeah.
Something like 10,000 dead.
It's a canny every day.
Yeah. Day after day after day after day. You can't really imagine it.
No
matter how many accounts you read,
no
matter how deep you get into World War I history, it's difficult to really imagine or picture it.
It's just awful.
Yeah. From the coast to Switzerland. Something like 20,000 prisoners were taken on the first day. I mean, every single one of those men, it's a whole family.
Yeah.
You know, sort of ripped apart.
Yeah.
On the second day, the Germans do start to realise, this isn't a walk in the park, actually. And they start doing, where they didn't have really concrete plans on exactly what to do if and when you break through into the intermediate zone, they just start doing kind of mindless 1916 style frontal assaults on things. Because the top guys didn't have plans. Yeah. So it devolves down to guys that are at the level of sort of captain and major and they don't have a grand strategic view.
No.
So they're like, well, the enemy's in front of us. What else can we do? We just attack.
Yeah.
So it becomes even more bloodier.
Yeah.
Mark Evans says that where they it was a wasteland of broken blockhouses, shell holes, and rusting wire, a wilderness. They're fighting in this intermediate zone, is sort of a wilderness that's already been a battlefield years before. So it's sort of like a charnel house. There's loads of rotting bodies there still, and all sorts of things trampled into the mud. And Tolkien was at Ypres, the Third Battle of Ypres, and Passchendaele and things. And there's a bit in Lord of the Rings where there's the what they call the Dead Marshes, or is that the name?
The marshes. Oh, yeah, I can't remember. You'd probably call the Dead Marshes, something like that. But where the bodies are in the lakes in the marsh. Yeah.
Well, that is what it was like. There's literally the ground is half bodies.
It's just terrible.
It's unbelievable. And so what it seems is that it devolves down to where individual pockets of men, sometimes only 3, 4, 5 guys, sometimes it's a few dozen, sometimes a couple of hundred or whatever, but quite often just a handful of guys desperately defending their position. They don't really know what's going on around them. Well, they definitely don't know what's going on around them, certainly out of sight over the horizon. No idea. All they know is it's their job to hold out for as long as they can. And so, yeah, real desperation, real kind of heroism, some heroic acts get done.
I imagine many were.
Lots of Iron Crosses and VCs and Medals of Honor were given out in 1918. All sorts of really suicidally brave, crazily gallant things were done on both sides. But just to cut it to an end here, really, because we've got to move on. The Allied line was able to hold.
Yeah.
They, over the next few days, because I say this goes on into April, the Allies were able to sort of organise, reshuffle things, so they were just about able to hold on. Because the other thing that Pétain and then later Foch wanted to do was to hold as many divisions as they possibly could in reserve, so that when these German offensives hopefully end or peter out, we can do a massive counter attack. Yeah. So whenever guys like Gough or Byng or Haig, or even their own generals, are begging for reinforcements, they give them the least they possibly can. It's harsh, isn't it? Really harsh.
Yeah, but you can see why. Yeah, because obviously when the Germans have worn themselves out, they've lost however many hundreds of thousands of men in this area of the line. Well, they're much weaker now, and it would be good to be able to just push through and roll them up. You can see why they'd do it.
Yeah. And to cut to the chase, I mean, that is the World War I winning thing in the end, is that exactly that. These German combos peter out, and we're able to do our one last massive set of offences. Well, that's what Churchill talked of. One of the crowning achievements of the British Army are those, which begin really in August, about August time. And as we all know, the war doesn't end till the 11th of November, so it's not like the Germans are just done at that point.
No.
Still hundreds of thousands of men get killed, but still, that is what happens. The huge set of counter-offensives.
Mad.
Okay. What's his name? Martin Evans says this, though, about the reorganisation and how the Allies were able to hold the line, basically. The quote, that description, though, lends a false air of organisation and coherence to what was a turmoil of semi-fragmented units held together by the sheer guts of officers and men determined to halt their enemies. They don't make them like that anymore. No. I don't know many Zoomers or millennials that would fight to the last
Gen
cartridge.
Xers, man. I mean, what are we going to do? You know?
Sorry, yeah. Me too.
Yeah, are we going to do that then?
Would I fight to the last cartridge in a shell crater?
Yeah.
Knowing that you're surrounded by whole divisions of the enemy? I don't know.
No, I think I'd probably surrender.
Yeah. Men are built of sterner stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. It got to such dire straits, though, that by a few days into this Operation Michael, the French were using anyone they could get their hands on. People that are already wounded, guys that are just working in workshops and work on the railways. They're in the army. You're in the French army, but you're not really a frontline infantry soldier, and yet you're just forced to the front to fight because every last man in the field counts.
Yeah.
in Operation Michael, the Royal Flying Corps threw everything, literally every last aircraft we had, to try and help out. Okay, it's in between the first and second punch that Pétain is replaced by Foch. He's not replaced entirely. He's still probably arguably the second most top general, but they replace him ultimately with Foch. And Foch is known as being very, very, very aggressive. Pétain was known a bit for a World War One general as trying to put the lives of his men, making that a priority on some level. By our standards, still not at all, but Foch was like, no, the order is you don't retreat an inch, that sort of thing. Sort of Stalin level of cold blood. And he's very, very aggressive on the offensive. And surprisingly, it wasn't until 1918, till Foch takes over here, that it was written in stone that he is the ultimate supreme commander. Until then, for example, the dynamic was like, Pétain is above Haig, and Haig treated everything he said like an order, but he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to. He ultimately took his orders from London, from the High Command, the British High Command. Whereas now, no, you actually definitely formally take your orders from Foch now. And all historians agree that is a massive help for us. That's what you needed. Sounds obvious, doesn't it, to say?
Yeah, a proper command structure is
you want
essential.
one mind conducting this thing. You kind of have to have that.
Yeah.
And of course, the Germans had that. On their side, it was Ludendorff essentially. All right. The next punch in this combo was Georgette. Now I mentioned they originally wanted this massive offensive of St George. Well, it had to be all sort of scaled down a bit. That's why they called it Georgette.
Oh right. Okay.
That was around Calais, or to punch towards Calais, Boulogne, and Dunkirk. In fact, if I could read a quick quote, which was a missive sent by Sir Douglas Haig to everyone when this big offensive happened. He said, quote, "To all ranks of the British Army in France and Flanders, 3 weeks ago today the enemy began its terrific attacks against us on a 50-mile front. His objects are to separate us from the French and to take the Channel ports and to destroy the British Army. In spite of throwing already 106 divisions into the battle and enduring the most reckless sacrifice of human life, he has as yet made little progress towards his goals. We owe this to the determined fighting and self-sacrifice of our troops. Words fail me to express the admiration which I feel for the splendid resistance offered by all ranks of our army under the most trying circumstances. Many among us are now tired. To those I would say that victory will belong to the side that holds out the longest. The French army is moving rapidly in great force to our support. There is no other course open to us but to fight it out. Every position must be held to the last man. There must be no retirement. With our backs to the wall, and believing in the justice of our cause, each of us must fight on to the end. The safety of our homes and the freedom of mankind depend alike upon the conduct of each of us in this critical moment."
It's mad.
Sort of mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's known as the backs against the wall statement.
That's what it is.
Yeah. So we were able to stop Georgette. They never did roll us into the sea there. But again, this particular punch of the combo falls heavily on the British. So we had something like 110,000 losses.
And how long a time period? How long did the offensive take?
Not long, a couple of weeks before they called it off.
Just a couple of weeks of it.
Yeah.
That's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks Georgette was. Yeah. Sorry, the German losses were 110,000. The British were merely 76,000.
Oh, wow. Checkmate, Germany.
29,000 of those prisoners. The French lost something like 35,000.
It's the numbers.
Yeah. Can't imagine it, can
Yeah.
you?
No.
I mean, you just can't.
I don't want to imagine it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
The next punch got a few different names, but Blucher York. Blucher / York is what it's often known as. That was much more in the east, the eastern part of the Western Front, so much more down near Verdun and Rheims.
Yeah.
Around there, near the River Marne, actually, sometimes known as the Second Battle of the Marne. And that's where there was probably one of the biggest, most famous actions that the Americans took part in at Belleau Wood. And the Americans, they're very good at fighting. They're very sort of healthy and things. Their morale was extremely high. But to begin with, they didn't take on board the advice the French and British were giving them. And they said, "Why aren't you just attacking? What's wrong with you? Well, you're not gallant enough. You're not brave enough."
Then
they found out why.
The American lack of experience in war, though, isn't it? This happened in North Africa as well, didn't it? When in World War II, when the American divisions turned up and they were like, just stand at the back.
At Kasserine Ridge,
You're actually more of a hindrance, because you don't know what you're doing. Yeah.
The Americans were like, we'll just attack. We're brave enough. We've got enough guys. And they just got mowed down. Yeah. Absolutely mowed down. Yeah. So they realised quite quickly. I did learn their lesson quite quickly. Yeah. Like you can't just, it's not about being gallant and brave.
Yeah. A couple of 100 years ago, that would have worked.
Yeah.
That would have been great. But that doesn't work now because they have machine guns.
Yeah. If I could read this quote, it's about this particular Second Battle of the Marne. This is from a German Major General. He said, because again, at first, the first day or two, it looked good. It was working because they were so meticulous about their planning. A German general wrote this: "Against the onslaught of 3 German divisions, which were quickly followed by 2 others, it was humanly impossible for the extended and surprised English troops to stand up. Our losses were remarkably small. The enemy had no time to resist. The English, who could usually be relied upon to hold out in shell holes, firing to their last cartridge, were given no opportunity by the violence and activity of our combined artillery and trench mortar fire to display their customary coolness. They were up against a force majeure and first blown out of their trenches and then surrendered. Sentry posts, Lewis gun teams and whole platoons saw their resistance was hopeless and were reluctantly obliged to surrender. Everywhere one could see groups stumbling down from the high ground to be taken prisoner by our waiting troops." So, yeah, again.
Must have been intense.
Very, very intense. In this third punch, the French lost 98,000 because it was much more on the French end of the line here. The British still lost something like 29,000. The Americans lost 10,000, most of that in Belleau Wood.
Right.
The Germans lost 131,000. So it's just numbers now, isn't it?
But this was a net gain for the Germans then.
Well, yeah. But ultimately, you have to punch through the line and get to Paris, and which they didn't do. They failed to do. So now historians start saying, most historians will start saying, well, the writing's on the wall now. Ludendorff had a mini breakdown before that punch, even.
Well, I don't blame it.
Because after the first big one, Operation Michael, he had a mini breakdown. It's like, that needed to work. Yeah. That one had to work
for this whole thing to work.
Yeah. Right. And so let's get into the final set of offensives from the Germans, which are pretty much between the 15th of July up to the 5th of August. And these ones don't go well at all. They're sort of stopped immediately.
Really?
Pretty much immediately.
Right.
For lots of different reasons, actually. One of the ones is that the British realised that, they're going to attack all summer long. All along the line. We've got to do everything we possibly can. Because the way World War I worked, despite us talking about it's constant, there were still hot points and certain points where the sector would be quiet for months on end. Or not quiet, they'd be sniping at all times.
But then there would be war for months on end.
Yeah. So we realised they're going to keep punching us all along the line all summer long. This is their final hurrah, if you like. So we're going to reinforce everything we possibly can. So these last sets of punches kind of don't really get much traction going. And the Americans fight very well at a place called Vaux, must be mentioned. We had Foch comes up with a counterattack, Operation Friedensturm. So that's one of those things. If you know they're going to attack, and we've got in our minds that we're going to do a counterattack at some point, why can't we just attack first? Instead of it being a counterattack, we'll just attack first. We'll just get our punch in first. Let's do that. Let's try and do that. So Foch has got a reputation for being very aggressive. So he does things like that. If we can massacre them in their own jump-off points, like one day before they're going to attack us, that's brilliant. This sort of thing happens in World War II a lot more. there's lots of battles go on in the Champagne region of France. The Germans basically don't really make any progress in this, and the Germans know, really, Ludendorff.
Yeah.
Most of the Germans know there's no way back from this. We needed this summer to go our way, and it ultimately just simply hasn't.
And I mean, how many men did they lose over the course of this summer?
Right, yeah, I can tell you.
So it must have been
all in all, the Germans killed 227,000. 765,000 wounded.
Yeah.
And the Spanish flu, the influenza pandemic, which everyone knows about, happened in 1919, killed maybe between 50 and 100 million people worldwide, far more bloody than World War I itself. It already started in the trenches.
Right.
The Germans had 1.9 million men invalided out to the flu.
Jesus Christ. So, I mean, they've already taken like 1 million casualties anyway.
So basically, there was something in the order of 950,000 men that they should have had in the line weren't. And that's about a fifth of their whole army.
God.
Yeah. And as I keep saying, I've said once, every single one of those is a family destroyed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Forever. Their demographic profoundly changed. German demographic was forever changed by World War I, as was the French. I mean, there's not a village, town, hamlet in the whole of England that doesn't have a World War I memorial in it.
Every single one.
A whole generation wasted, really.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.